die for? Maybe. We might get there, but if you were to think of a person that you've loved in your life, somebody who exists now or has ever existed, that you would love so much that you would jump in front of a train, in front of a bullet for them, I think that kind of loyalty, that kind of dedication is something much stronger than just ideas and thoughts. And I think that was the love that kind of tied the disciples to Jesus in that moment, was the fact that the nature of him throughout the time they had known him already had been one of just absolute love. Love for every single person that came in front of him. Love for the servant, and love for the beggar, and love for the leper, and love for everybody that nobody else would even look at. And I think that they saw something in him and felt something in him that was so strong that although they couldn't define it as a different kind of authority, or couldn't really define and understand what it meant to have power in that kind of a way, a power that is defined and made from love, that is love, that doesn't need anything else to keep it up there, doesn't need more money, doesn't need another house, just love itself sustains itself. And love to the point of extinction, love to the point that I know that this love will kill me, but I love you that much, I'm going to do it anyway. But something about the authenticity of that love kept them with him, kept them in that room, and I think is what grew the very beginnings of what Christianity was always intended to be. It was a story of a man who entirely was defined by love. I had a couple questions that I put up on the slide about, just for yourself, if you want to jot down, you don't have to jot down, you can just kind of think about, for you, who is God? How do you see him? Who or what is he to you? And who is Jesus? How do you see him? Who or what is he to you? And then what do you want from God? And what do you think God wants from you? And just take a moment maybe just to think about what those things look like for you. I put up a few words because the thing is that, you can keep writing. Those are very heavy questions, and some of that, the answers to that come from what we learned when we were very little, what we've learned maybe through teachings and different experiences in churches and faiths, maybe with other people, but I think there's still a lot of ambiguity about who is Jesus to me, who is God to me. They both seem very far off, very distant, very intangible, and sometimes it's hard to understand or feel in this moment what God could really be in that kind of love, what Jesus could really be in the kind of love of that story. And I put up some words and some thoughts about, so when you hear about the word God, do any of these things ever come up for you? The idea of father, brother, friend, partner, lover, mother. Throughout history, people that have written about God have used all of those terms at one time or another to define God, because usually we define God, one, by the way that the stories we hear sort of form and fit God into sort of a package, and then also whatever our relationship, our personal relationship is with God. A lot of the Christian mystics do use words like lover and beloved, which to some people, to bride, I am the bride of Christ. Some of the monastics and the female mystics, and brother and friend, and some of those things that maybe we don't always see when we see God as that intimate person. And so I asked, on the opposite end of that, do you ever think of the words punisher, vengeful, jealous, intolerant, cruel, absent? I know there are plenty places, particularly stories, a lot of times people will reference in the Old Testament where there's a lot of like fire and brimstone, vengeance and anger, coming out of a historical time and also a historical understanding of God that was still evolving and came through the experience of people who were going through things and struggling with their own stuff along the way, the imperfection of humans, that imperfection that's everywhere. And sometimes we kind of take those stories and we literalize a feeling about God. So maybe God doesn't always seem like friend, lover, brother. Maybe God seems like somebody that could be kind of scary. I was watching or listening, I can't remember, one of my favorite theologians is Richard Rohr, and he said, he was talking about people's perceptions about God, and sometimes it's very ambiguous, but for a lot of people, they're afraid of God. A lot of people don't come to church or show up in places of worship because of the impression they have of who they think God is and how they think God would play a role in their life, and it's scary, and they're afraid of him. And maybe they're even sitting in a church or showing up to a worship experience mostly out of a place of fear, because a lot of our God imagery in some places, in some environments, can come out of a place of fear, and our understanding of him can come out of a place of fear. And so Richard Rohr was talking about Jesus going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and spending time reflecting and being in the presence of God. And he reflected on kind of like the present day. You know, if you knew someone and he had killed a whole lot of people, he was really, really vengeful, he was really angry, you never knew what was going to happen if you were around him. He said, would you really go in the desert with that guy? He's like, I'm not going to go on a camping trip with that guy. So I think the image of God has gotten some bad PR over time, and that God at his root is what Jesus expresses in this very moment, in what he's telling the disciples, this expression of love. And that's why I called sort of the speaking overall of what I wanted to talk about tonight, is the idea of God as love. God is love. Because the essential root of God, we take away all the books and all the talks and all the doctrines and all the teachings, down at the root of the root, the bud of the bud, the tree called life, which is part of an E. Cummings poem that I like, is that love. That the seed of love is really where all good works happen. It's where all good faith is born, real faith. Not just showing up in a place because we're afraid that something bad will happen if we don't show up there. But really showing up there because I feel like I have a friend, I have a brother, I have a father, I have somebody I love that's there in that place when I show up there. And maybe that place is in a church, and maybe it's in a synagogue, and maybe it's in a mosque, and maybe it's in my bedroom, you know, where I sit and I think and I pray at night. And wherever that place is, and wherever those seeds of love are, thinking that God is inherently part of what that is. And that Jesus' entire life, everything he did, and what he's explaining of what's going to happen right now in this passage, is the ultimate expression of love. That Jesus' life brought down to the bare essentials, the basic minimum, the skeleton of what it all is. He was brought in this world to remind us how to love. He spent every minute of his life teaching the way of love. Not by talking so much, although he talked, but by doing it. By loving people that other people wouldn't look at, wouldn't see as lovable, and wouldn't be in a room with. By knowing that his entire life was going to end with his own extinction because of that love. Loving God, for him loving God that much, to follow and do that thing that is the hardest thing of all. It's against our very nature to want to have ourselves die. It's against our own survival mechanism, animals, as creatures. To go against that because of his love of God. And for God to put him in this world to do that thing, for his love of us. And that everything I see in this story, in this gospel teaching, is the idea that Jesus' entire life and his death was here to show us and to teach us what the core of love is when we get down to it. And it's not about race, and it's not about creed, and it's not about what I believe or what you believe or what church you go to or what synagogue I go to. It's about just the essence of love. And when we can get down to that, and when we can come in our faith, and we can look at God, and we can look at the life of Jesus from that place, I think that makes our relationship with him, with them, something that carries us through, and our relationship with other people, something that makes us a better person. Because again, I'm not going to have a lifelong relationship with somebody that I wouldn't even go camping with. So I think it's about getting down to the root of that. And just in closing, what I hope that this community and this